Choose now, Miss Hartwell, the Duke's table or the old woman. Eleanor looked toward the place card that could rescue her family from ruin. Then she looked at the frail stranger, swaying near the entrance, while every servant refused to admit her. Eleanor crossed the room and offered the woman her seat. A murmur spread through Blackwood Hall. Nearly 200 guests had gathered beneath its chandeliers, but every eye followed Eleanor as she guided the stranger toward the chair, bearing her name. Her aunt caught her sleeve. "Have you lost your senses?" Lady Margaret whispered. "Your father's creditors have given us until Monday. One favourable introduction tonight could save Hartwell Cottage. She can barely stand, and you can barely afford bread." Eleanor gently freed herself. The old woman wore a threadbare brown dress, darkened by rain. One shoe had split at the toe, and blood stained the hand she kept pressed against her chest. "Sit here," Eleanor said. "Please." The stranger stared at the silver place card. "But this chair belongs beside His Grace. Tonight, it belongs to someone who needs it." Behind them, Lady Cecily Ashbourne gave a delighted laugh. She had spent the evening circling the vacant seat like a hawk waiting for an injured bird to fall. "How generous of you, Miss Hartwell." Before Eleanor could answer, Cecily removed the place card and handed it to a footman. His Grace should not be forced to dine beside a beggar. The footman hesitated. Lady Cecily lowered herself into Eleanor's chair. The decision was now irreversible. "You have surrendered your place," she said. "Do not embarrass yourself by asking for it back." "I had no intention of doing so." Eleanor knelt beside the old woman. The stranger's pulse fluttered beneath her fingertips, fast and uneven. Eleanor remembered her father counting heartbeats beside the beds of miners, widows, and tenant children who could never afford a London physician. "You are feverish," Eleanor said. "How long have you been outside?" "Since noon." Eleanor's head snapped up. It was nearly 8 o'clock. "You asked for help?" "I asked for the Duke." Lady Cecily leaned closer. "His Grace does not receive wandering paupers." The old woman's face tightened. "I did not come for charity." "Then why are you here?" The stranger looked at the Blackwood crest embroidered across the banquet cloth. "To stop another burial." The orchestra began playing, swallowing the nervous whispers around them. At the far end of the hall, the great doors opened. Adrian Blackwood, the spent Duke of Blackwood, entered with his steward at his right shoulder. Every unmarried woman rose. Eleanor remained beside the old woman. The Duke was taller than she remembered from the single occasion she had seen him in Parliament Square. His expression possessed the controlled stillness of a man, accustomed to having rooms rearrange themselves around him. Lady Cecily smiled as he approached. "Your Grace," Miss Hartwell abandoned her place. "I feared you might be left without suitable company." The Duke glanced at Cecily, then at Eleanor. His gaze lingered on her worn blue gown before dropping to the stranger seated beside her. "Who is this woman?" "No one of importance," Cecily answered. The old woman flinched. Eleanor rose. "She has been waiting outside your house for nearly 8 hours. The Duke's attention shifted to the steward. Mr. Silas Crowther was a narrow-faced man with silver spectacles and a voice so calm it made every command sound reasonable. "No petitioner was scheduled tonight," he said. "She was told to return during the public relief session." "There is no public relief session," the woman whispered. Crowther's expression did not change. "You are confused." "No." Her voice strengthened. "I was told it ended 3 months ago." The Duke frowned. "Blackwood relief hearings are held every Thursday." "Not for widows," she said. "Not anymore." Crowther signalled to 2 footmen. "The woman is fevered, Your Grace. She should be removed before she disturbs the guests." The men stepped forward. The old woman recoiled so sharply that her chair struck the table. The wounded hand slipped from her chest, revealing a piece of black wax embedded in her palm. "Wait," Eleanor ordered. The footman stopped, startled by the authority in her voice. She wrapped a clean napkin around the woman's hand. As Eleanor eased the wax free, she saw the impression pressed into its surface. A crowned stag, the emblem of Blackwood House. Yet something was wrong. Her father had once shown her how dishonest merchants copied official seals. A mould taken directly from an original produced a reversed image, unless the forger corrected it by hand. On this seal, the stag's antlers faced left. The genuine crest displayed above the Duke's chair faced right. Eleanor closed her fingers around the wax. Crowther saw her do it. For one brief instant, his polished composure disappeared. "Give that to me," he said. The order was too quick, and too sharp. The Duke turned toward him. What is it? Nothing of consequence. Eleanor met Crowther's eyes. If it is nothing, why are you afraid of my examining it? Lady Cecily gasped at Eleanor's insolence. Several guests leaned closer, their interest no longer fixed upon the Duke's marriage prospects. Crowther extended his hand. That seal is the property of Blackwood House. Then His Grace should receive it. Eleanor stepped toward the Duke, but the old woman suddenly seized her wrist. Her grip was astonishingly strong. Not here, she pleaded. They will say I stole it. Who will? The men who took my pension. The men who declared my son dead. Crowther moved forward. That is enough. The Duke raised one hand, stopping him. What is your son's name? The old woman stared at Adrian as though the answer might condemn them both. Captain Thomas Bell. Silence struck the table. The Duke's expression hardened. Captain Bell died at Salamanca 4 years ago. No, she said. He returned to England 6 weeks ago. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered. Crowther's face had gone pale. The old woman pulled Eleanor closer until her lips nearly touched Eleanor's ear. Ask the Duke why his steward is burying widows who are still alive. Before Eleanor could respond, the chandeliers went dark. Someone screamed. A hand closed around Eleanor's fingers and tore the false seal from her grasp. Eleanor tightened her fingers, but the wax vanished from her palm. Do not move, the Duke commanded. Chairs scraped across the floor. Women cried out as servants rushed toward the walls, searching for candles. Eleanor caught the wrist of the person beside her. The hand was narrow and gloved. Release me, Lady Cecily hissed. A flame appeared near the musicians' gallery, then another. Within seconds, footmen moved through the hall, relighting the chandeliers. Eleanor looked down. Cecily's hand was empty. The old woman was no longer in her chair. Where is she? Eleanor asked. Her shawl lay crumpled on the carpet, but there was no trace of Mrs. Bell. 2 footmen stood near the rear doors. One rubbed his jaw as though he had been struck. Someone came through here, he said. A man in a servant's coat. Crowther stepped between the Duke and the doorway. The woman must have arranged this disturbance to escape. She could barely walk, Eleanor replied. Then perhaps her weakness was another deception. Eleanor turned to the Duke. Your Grace, the seal was taken from my hand when the room went dark. Adrian's gaze moved over the guests. Seal every exit. Crowther stiffened. There are nearly 200 people present. Several are connected to the royal household. Then they should appreciate the importance of protecting a witness. The doors closed before anyone could protest. Lady Cecily pulled off her gloves. If Miss Hartwell intends to accuse me, she should do so plainly. I caught your wrist, because I was trying not to fall. Eleanor examined Cecily's gloves. Neither showed a trace of black wax, and both fitted too perfectly to hide anything inside. Cecily smiled. Perhaps you imagined the seal. You have made quite a spectacle of yourself tonight. She did not imagine it. Adrian's voice cut through the whispers. He walked to the Blackwood crest, carved into the mantle, and touched the stag's antlers. The direction Eleanor described is the mark produced by a poorly copied mould. It was the first time he had spoken her name. Crowther adjusted his silver spectacles. Even if such an object existed, it proves nothing. Forgers copy noble seals every day. That is precisely what it proves, Eleanor said. Someone is issuing documents in the Duke's name, and you reach that conclusion from a scrap of wax you no longer possess? No, I reached it from your fear of letting His Grace see it. Crowther's jaw tightened. Adrian turned toward his steward. Bring me the widow pension register. Tonight? Now. The records are kept at the relief office. It would take hours to... They are kept in the East Archive, Eleanor interrupted. Every face turned toward her. Crowther's eyes narrowed. How would you know? Because my father treated the previous relief clerk. He complained that you moved the registers into the house after accusing him of copying pension certificates. The Duke studied her. Was the clerk dismissed? He disappeared. That is a grave claim. It is a fact. Mr. Amos Reed vanished 3 months ago, the same week the widow hearings supposedly ended. Crowther gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. You expect His Grace to trust the gossip of country patients. Eleanor felt the familiar sting beneath his contempt. Her father had died respected by the poor and indebted to the rich. Men like Crowther considered both conditions proof of failure. She lifted her chin. He should trust whatever the register shows. Adrian called to the captain of his household guard. Take 2 men to the East Archive. Bring every pension ledger from the last 5 years. Crowther stepped closer to him. Your Grace, a private examination would be wiser. Rumours of fraud could damage the Blackwood name. If fraud was committed beneath my seal, silence would damage it more. For the first time, something resembling unease crossed the steward's face. Of course. The guards departed. Eleanor retrieved her shawl from the floor. A dark smear crossed one corner, not mud, but lamp oil. She brought it closer and detected a sharp, herbal scent. Wintergreen. Her father had used the oil to ease swollen joints. Mrs. Bell's coat had carried the same scent when Eleanor helped her sit down. A small brass button was tangled in the fringe. It bore the number 12. Eleanor looked toward the servants. The Blackwood footman wore plain brass buttons without numbers. Your Grace. Adrian came to her side. She showed him the button. The man who took Mrs. Bell wore a uniform, but I do not believe it belonged to your household. Adrian turned it beneath the candlelight. A military coat. 12th Regiment, said an older gentleman near the table. The same regiment in which Captain Bell served. 12th, 12th, 12th. A chill passed through Eleanor. The false seal, the vanished relief clerk, the stolen pensions, and a soldier officially declared dead were not separate matters. Someone had built an entire system upon men who could no longer speak and widows no one would believe. The rear door opened. One of the Duke's guards entered alone, blood running from his temple. Adrian crossed the room. Where is the other man? Gone, Your Grace. What happened? The East Archive had already been opened. Someone struck us from inside. Crowther's face became perfectly still. The ledgers? Eleanor asked. The guard swallowed. Burning. Adrian ordered servants to the archive. The hall erupted into movement, but Eleanor remained where she was. A folded strip of blue paper protruded from beneath Lady Cecily's chair. Eleanor bent and pulled it free. One line had been written across it in a trembling hand. If they take me, find the grave with no body. Below the message was a list of 7 women. Eleanor recognized the first name. It belonged to her own mother. Eleanor read the name twice. Mary Hartwell. Her mother had been dead for 14 years. She had never been a soldier's widow, nor had she received a pension from Blackwood House. Yet beside her name appeared a payment of £30, repeated every quarter. What did you find? Adrian asked. Eleanor folded the paper before Crowther could see it. A list Mrs. Bell left behind. The Duke held out his hand. Eleanor did not give it to him. If your seal has been forged and your archive set ablaze, I cannot assume everyone serving this house is loyal. Crowther's voice sharpened. You are speaking to the Duke of Blackwood. I know precisely whom I am speaking to. Adrian glanced toward the burning archive. Smoke had begun slipping beneath the eastern doors, while servants formed a line from the courtyard pump. Then he looked back at Eleanor. What would persuade you to trust me? Find Mrs. Bell alive. A muscle tightened in his jaw. And until then, the list remains with me. Lady Cecily rose from Eleanor's former chair. This has become absurd. A penniless physician's daughter arrives uninvited, places a beggar beside his grace, claims to see a forged seal, and conveniently discovers a secret message connected to her own family. I was invited, Eleanor replied. You are sitting on the proof. Cecily glanced at the discarded place card beneath her wineglass. Laughter rippled from the far end of the table. Her cheeks reddened. Crowther intervened. Lady Cecily raises a reasonable concern. Miss Hartwell may have created this performance to attract his Grace's attention. Eleanor nearly laughed. I surrendered the only seat that would have placed me beside him. A clever sacrifice, if you intended to become more memorable than every woman who kept hers. Adrian faced his steward. You have questioned her poverty, her father, and her motives. You have not answered her evidence. There is no evidence. The seal is gone, the witness fled, and the ledgers are burning. Exactly, Eleanor said. Everything capable of proving Mrs. Bell's story has disappeared within minutes of her speaking. A bell sounded from the eastern corridor. The servants' voices rose. Fire in the upper passage, someone shouted. Crowther turned to Adrian. Your Grace, the guests must be evacuated. Through the main entrance only, Adrian ordered. Every carriage and servant is to be recorded. before anyone leaves. The noblewomen protested, but the guards began directing them toward the front courtyard. Eleanor slipped the blue paper into the hidden pocket of her gown. Her aunt hurried toward her. "We must go." "Not yet. Your mother's name is on that list, isn't it?" Eleanor stared at her. Lady Margaret's face had lost all colour. "You knew?" "I knew Mary received letters after your father died. She burned each one without opening it. My father died 6 years after her. They were not addressed to him." Eleanor lowered her voice. "Who sent them?" "I never saw a name, only a black stag pressed into the wax." Before Eleanor could ask another question, Lady Margaret gripped her arm. "Your mother made me promise never to speak of Blackwood House." "Why?" "She said the truth would destroy 2 families." A beam cracked inside the eastern passage. Sparks burst through the doorway, and the crowd surged toward the main hall. Lady Margaret was swept away with them. Eleanor tried to follow, but a servant girl stumbled near the smoke. She fell beneath the feet of the fleeing guests. Eleanor pushed through the crowd and pulled the girl upright. "Can you walk?" The girl coughed and nodded. "Take my arm." A burning strip of curtain dropped across their path. Adrian seized it with a brass fire hook and dragged it aside. "This way." He led them through a servants' corridor and into the courtyard. Rain struck Eleanor's face as Adrian handed the girl to a waiting footman. "You should leave with your aunt," he said, "and you should search for Mrs. Bell. I have already sent men to the gates and stables. They will not find her there." "What makes you certain?" "The oil on my shawl." She showed him the stained fringe. "Wintergreen was used on Mrs. Bell's joints. The man who carried her left this mark while lifting her. He would avoid the main doors, but he could not carry an elderly woman over the estate wall." Adrian understood. "The delivery tunnels." Crowther emerged from the hall behind them. "Your Grace, the east wing may collapse. You cannot remain here." Adrian watched him for a moment. How did the abductor know about the tunnels? "Every senior servant knows, and every senior servant answers to you." Crowther's expression hardened. "Be careful what you imply." "I am finished implying." Adrian ordered 2 guards to accompany him to the lower passage. Eleanor stepped forward. "I am coming." "No. Mrs. Bell trusted me, and someone has already tried to destroy everything she gave you. That is why you need me. I can identify the scent she left behind." Adrian looked as though he intended to refuse again. Then smoke poured from an upper window, and another bell began ringing. "Stay beside me," he said. They entered the kitchens and descended a narrow staircase. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, 3 brick tunnels divided beneath the house. Eleanor closed her eyes and breathed slowly. Smoke drifted from the eastern passage. Damp soil and horse manure came from the west. The middle tunnel carried wintergreen. This way, they followed the scent until Adrian raised his lantern. A broken military button lay near the wall. Farther ahead, they found Eleanor's shawl pin embedded in a wooden door. Mrs. Bell must have pulled it free before she was taken. Eleanor pressed her ear against the wood. A woman was breathing on the other side. "Mrs. Bell." The breathing stopped. Adrian drew the key from his coat, but it would not enter the lock. "It has been replaced." One guard struck the door with his shoulder. The wood held. From beyond it came Mrs. Bell's frightened voice. "Do not break it." Eleanor leaned closer. "Why?" "Because they tied the firing cord to the latch." Adrian lifted the lantern, revealing a thin black wire running from beneath the door into a keg beside the wall. Gunpowder. Behind them, a lock clicked. The tunnel entrance had been sealed. Then Crowther's voice travelled through the darkness. "You should have taken your seat beside the Duke, Miss Hartwell." Adrian turned toward Crowther's voice. "Open the tunnel." A soft laugh answered him. "You have commanded me for 12 years, Your Grace. I believe I have obeyed long enough." Eleanor raised the lantern and found a narrow ventilation shaft above the locked entrance. Crowther stood somewhere beyond it, close enough to hear them, but safely separated by an iron gate. Adrian drew his pistol. "You will not leave Blackwood Land alive if Mrs. Bell is harmed." An impressive threat from a man trapped beside a powder keg. Eleanor followed the black cord from the door to the powder keg. "The latch is tied to the charge," she said. "If we open the door, it explodes." Mrs. Bell's frightened voice came from the other side. "There is a drain beneath me." Eleanor found the narrow channel at the base of the wall and pushed her hatpin through it. "Use this to lift the hinge pins. Do not touch the latch." Metal scraped against stone. Behind them, Crowther struck the locked gate. "Stop what you are doing." Adrian moved between Eleanor and the powder keg. "If it ignites, take Mrs. Bell and run." Eleanor seized his wrist. "I did not give up my chair tonight, so another person could decide whose life mattered least." The first hinge pin fell, then the second. Adrian caught the door before it pulled the cord tight. Mrs. Bell appeared through the narrow opening, but there was not enough room for her to escape. A spark flashed at the far end of the tunnel. Crowther had lit the fuse. Eleanor saw the knot connecting the door to the charge. Her father had taught her how to loosen the same knot from surgical bandages. "Give me your knife." She cut the cord. Adrian kicked the powder keg into the flooded drain as the guards pulled Mrs. Bell free. The explosion shook the tunnel. Water and broken stone burst around them, and Adrian threw himself over Eleanor. When the dust settled, Mrs. Bell was still breathing. She pressed a small iron key into Eleanor's palm. "Your father," she whispered to Adrian. "I saw him 3 nights ago beside Eleanor's mother's grave." Adrian went still. "My father has been dead for 11 years. Adrian's body shielded hers. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Mrs. Bell began coughing. Eleanor crawled toward her. "Are you injured?" "No." The old woman gripped Eleanor's hand. "But you must listen before he returns." "Crowther?" "No." Mrs. Bell looked at Adrian. "Your father." Adrian froze. "My father has been dead for 11 years. Mrs. Bell reached inside her dress and removed a small iron key. "Then someone should explain why I saw him 3 nights ago in the graveyard where Eleanor's mother is buried." Adrian stared at Mrs. Bell. "Describe the man." "He had your father's face, his voice, and the scar beneath his left eye. My father died in my arms. Then the dead have learned to walk." A section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Water rushed over the stones, carrying fragments of the shattered powder keg toward the western passage. One guard tested the damaged entrance. The explosion loosened the gate. Adrian and both guards drove their shoulders against it. The iron frame tore free from the cracked brickwork on their 3rd attempt. Eleanor helped Mrs. Bell through the opening. "You said you saw the old Duke near my mother's grave. Why were you there?" "My son told me to go." "Captain Bell?" Mrs. Bell nodded. "He came home 6 weeks ago with a bullet wound in his shoulder. He said men in London were collecting pensions under the names of soldiers who had survived the war." "Where is he now?" Adrian asked. "I do not know. Crowther's men took him." They climbed toward the kitchens. Adrian kept one hand beneath Mrs. Bell's arm, but his expression remained rigid. Eleanor understood why. Mrs. Bell had not merely accused his steward of theft. She had placed the image of his dead father at the center of it. When they emerged from the lower staircase, soldiers were waiting. Not Blackwood guards. Their red coats carried the insignia of the 12th Regiment. A grey-haired colonel stepped forward. "Your Grace, step away from Miss Hartwell." Adrian did not move. "On whose authority?" "The Crown's." The impostor unfolded a warrant. "Eleanor Hartwell is accused of stealing military pension funds, forging the Blackwood seal, and conspiring to burn the Duke's records." Mrs. Bell cried out, "That is a lie." The impostor glanced at her. "And who are you?" A woman she tried to save, or a witness she hired. Eleanor felt Adrian's attention settle upon her. "May I see the warrant?" she asked. The impostor handed it to Adrian instead. His eyes moved across the page. "The complaint was filed by Silas Crowther," he said. "And supported by documents recovered from Hartwell Cottage," the impostor replied. "We searched the property less than an hour ago." Eleanor's blood went cold. "My aunt was there. She was detained." "What did you find?" "Blank pension certificates, a copied Blackwood seal, and 43 letters addressed to dead soldiers' families. I have never seen any of those things." Lady Cecily entered through the servants' hall, wrapped in a velvet cloak. "I warned you, Your Grace." Eleanor faced her. "You extinguished the chandeliers." "I did no such thing. I caught your wrist, and I saw you place the black wax in the old woman's hand before the lights failed." Mrs. Bell tried to rise, but her injured leg buckled. "She is lying." Cecily looked at the impostor. "Miss Hartwell told me earlier this evening that the Duke would remember her name before midnight. I believed it was the desperate boast of a ruined woman." Eleanor's anger steadied her. "You took my place beside him, a place you surrendered after arranging this spectacle." Adrian held the warrant near the lamp. When was this signed? 7 o'clock, the impostor answered. Eleanor looked toward the clock. She had not met Mrs. Bell until after 7. Crowther had accused her before the supposed conspiracy even began. That proves the charge was prepared in advance. It proves only that Mr. Crowther informed us of his suspicions before tonight. No, Eleanor said. The warrant names the archive fire. The fire did not begin until after 8. The impostor took the paper and examined it. Lady Cecily's expression flickered. Adrian saw it. Who told you the archive would burn? I did not read the warrant. But you knew Eleanor would be accused. Crowther warned me that she was dangerous. Crowther also tried to kill us beneath my house. Cecily stepped back. That cannot be true. One of the guards held up a piece of the firing cord. We all witnessed it. The impostor lowered the warrant. Until this matter is examined, Miss Hartwell must come with us. Adrian blocked his path. You are holding a document that predicts a crime before it occurs. I am also responsible for protecting Crown funds. If the evidence at Hartwell Cottage is genuine, I cannot ignore it. Then place her under my protection. The impostor's face hardened. Your protection has already permitted 5 years of theft. The words struck Adrian visibly. He could command servants, tenants, and guests, but the military officers standing before him answered to a higher authority. If you resist, the impostor continued, I will report that the Duke of Blackwood obstructed a Crown investigation. Eleanor touched Adrian's sleeve. Let me go with them. No. If you stop them by force, Crowther will claim you are protecting me because I helped conceal your family's crimes. You may be hanged. Then we must prove the warrant false before I reach London. Adrian looked toward the paper again. The reversed seal had disappeared. The archive was burning, and planted evidence waited at her home. Someone had arranged every path to lead back to Eleanor. He faced the impostor. She will remain at Blackwood Hall until dawn. Your soldiers may guard every door. I cannot agree. You can, if I surrender the Blackwood pension accounts to the Crown and relinquish my authority over the fund. Lady Cecily gasped. The fund controlled thousands of pounds and supported nearly every military alliance attached to the estate. Giving it up would disgrace Adrian publicly and weaken his political standing. The impostor considered him. Until dawn, he said. After that, she travels under guard. Adrian signed the surrender order. His hand did not tremble. Eleanor watched the ink dry. He had sacrificed power to give her a few hours, but she could not mistake it for rescue. By dawn, she would still be arrested unless she found proof stronger than Crowther's manufactured case. The impostor ordered his soldiers to surround the house. Mrs. Bell pressed the iron key into Eleanor's hand. This opens the Hartwell family vault. We have no family vault. You do now. Eleanor examined the key. A small letter M had been engraved near its teeth. Mary, her mother's name. What did you see in the graveyard? The man wearing the old Duke's face entered your mother's tomb. When he came out, he carried a ledger bound in white leather. Eleanor unfolded the blue list again. 7 women, 7 false pensions. At the bottom, beneath the names, she now noticed a line written in smaller ink. The 8th widow will be created before dawn. A gunshot sounded from the courtyard. One of the military guards stumbled through the kitchen door. Your Grace, he gasped. Lady Margaret's carriage has been attacked. Eleanor caught him before he fell. Where is my aunt? The guard looked at the blood covering his hand. She was taken toward the Hartwell graveyard. Eleanor ran toward the courtyard. Adrian caught her before she reached the steps. You cannot ride into an ambush. My aunt is there, and Crowther expects you to follow. Then he should not be disappointed. The impostor blocked the entrance. Miss Hartwell remains under arrest. Adrian thrust the surrender order into his hand. You agreed she would remain under guard until dawn. You did not say where. The impostor read his expression and signaled 4 soldiers. You have 2 hours. Rain struck them as they crossed the courtyard. Eleanor mounted the first saddled horse, ignoring Adrian's attempt to help her. You ride? He asked. My father treated families who could not afford to live near a road. They left Blackwood Hall with Mrs. Bell secured in a carriage behind the soldiers. The fire cast an orange glow across the clouds. Eleanor leaned low over the horse's neck. Why did you give Crowther control of the pension fund? Adrian rode beside her. My father appointed him. That is not what I asked. His jaw tightened. 5 years ago, widows complained that payments were late. I intended to examine the accounts. But you did not. Crowther showed me letters accusing the former clerk of theft. I dismissed the man and granted Crowther sole authority. Amos Reed. Yes, the clerk who disappeared. Adrian looked toward the road. I signed the order without hearing him. The admission carried no excuse. Then Crowther did not steal despite your authority, Eleanor said. He stole through it. I know. Do you? Adrian met her gaze. The archive burned because I allowed one man to control the accounts, the keys, and the complaints. Mrs. Bell was taken because my servants had learned that turning away the poor pleased him more than admitting them pleased me. Eleanor heard the cost in his voice, but she did not soften the truth. And my aunt may die because he needed someone to blame. Yes, Adrian urged his horse forward. That consequence belongs to me. Saving her does not erase it. They reached Hartwell Cottage before midnight. The front door hung from one hinge. Drawers had been emptied across the floor, and Eleanor's father's medical books lay trampled beneath muddy boots. Eleanor stopped in the parlour. A porcelain bird rested broken beside the fireplace. Her mother had painted it shortly before her death. For the first time that night, Eleanor's composure failed. She knelt and gathered the pieces. Her home had survived unpaid bills, winter hunger, and the quiet removal of every valuable object. Crowther's men had destroyed what money could never replace. Adrian crouched beside her, but did not touch her. I am sorry. Do not apologize for the porcelain. Her voice broke despite her effort. Apologize if we find my aunt dead. She placed the fragments on the mantel and rose. A soldier entered from the rear room. The planted documents are gone. The impostor had sent men ahead to secure them, yet the chests described in the warrant were empty. Crowther was removing his own evidence. He knows we found the date on the warrant, Eleanor said. He can no longer risk anyone examining the papers. Adrian studied the muddy prints. 2 men left through the garden. They took something heavy. The copied seal? Cop. Oh, and perhaps the white ledger. Mrs. Bell entered with the aid of a soldier. She pointed toward a narrow shelf above the writing desk. Was anything kept there? My father's medicine case. The shelf was empty. Eleanor examined the dust. A clean rectangle showed where the case had stood. Why steal medical instruments? Mrs. Bell looked toward the dark windows. My son was shot with a pistol belonging to a military surgeon. He kept the ball after removing it himself. The ball could identify the weapon, Eleanor said, and the officer who fired it. Adrian moved toward the door. Crowther is taking everything to the graveyard. Eleanor slipped her mother's blue list into her bodice and followed. The Hartwell burial ground stood half a mile beyond the cottage. Yew trees surrounded a small stone chapel and 6 family tombs. As they approached, Eleanor saw torchlight moving between the graves. The impostor ordered his soldiers to spread out. A woman screamed, "Aunt Margaret!" Eleanor ran toward the sound. Lady Margaret sat bound to the chapel gate. A rope encircled her waist, securing her to the iron bars. "Stop!" she cried. "The ground is trapped." Eleanor froze. Fresh soil covered the path between them. Crowther appeared behind the chapel with a pistol pressed against Lady Margaret's head. "You have caused me a costly evening, Miss Hartwell." Adrian raised his weapon. "Release her. If I fall, 3 charges beneath this path will ignite." Crowther held up a thin cord tied around his wrist. Eleanor looked at the disturbed earth. He had buried gunpowder where anyone rushing toward her aunt would step. "You cannot escape," Adrian said. "The graveyard is surrounded." "I do not need to escape. I need the Duke to choose." Crowther nodded toward the oldest tomb. A man stepped from its doorway, carrying a white leather ledger. Adrian's pistol lowered by an inch. The stranger had the old Duke of Blackwood's face. He was older than the portrait hanging at Blackwood Hall, and a pale scar crossed beneath his left eye. Even his posture mirrored Adrian's. "My God," Adrian whispered. The man smiled. "Is that how you greet your father? You are not my father. Your mother once said the same thing." Eleanor studied him. The resemblance was extraordinary, but his right hand shook uncontrollably. Her father had recorded the old Duke's final illness. Paralysis had begun on his left side. This man's weakness was on the wrong side. "You are his brother," Eleanor said. The stranger's smile disappeared. Adrian stared at him. "My uncle the impostor died before I was born." "No," Lady Margaret called from the gate. He was paid to disappear. The impostor aimed his pistol at Eleanor. Mary should never have told you. My mother knew you? She discovered I was replacing my brother at pension hearings whenever he was ill. After his death, Crowther realized my face could keep his orders alive. Eleanor understood. The forged seal created documents in the old Duke's name, but the impostor's face persuaded frightened witnesses that the dead man still commanded the scheme. Crowther pulled Lady Margaret closer. Give me the blue list. Oh. Eleanor removed it slowly. Adrian stepped in front of her. No, Crowther smiled. Then Lady Margaret becomes the 8th widow. She has never married, Eleanor said. Not her. Crowther aimed the pistol past Lady Margaret. The barrel pointed toward Mrs. Bell. A man stumbled from behind the Hartwell tomb, his hands chained and his shirt soaked with blood. Mrs. Bell screamed. Thomas! Captain Bell collapsed beside an open grave. Crowther tightened the firing cord around his wrist. The 8th widow will be his mother, and the Duke of Blackwood will sign the death certificate himself. Eleanor held the blue list above the nearest torch. Fire your pistol, and I burn the only record you have not recovered. Crowther tightened his grip on the cord. You need that list more than I do. I need my family alive. She moved the paper closer to the flame, its lower edge curled. Release, Captain Bell. Crowther glanced at the impostor. The older man dragged Thomas upright and pressed a pistol beneath his chin. Mrs. Bell stepped forward. Eleanor caught her arm. Trust me, Crowther smiled. You have nothing with which to bargain. I have your 7 false widows, the date on your warrant, and 4 crown soldiers who heard you threaten a living captain declared dead. Words disappear. Witnesses reconsider. Then why are you so desperate for one piece of paper? His smile faded. Eleanor had found his weakness. The blue list was not merely a record of stolen payments. It connected every false widow to Crowther's operation. Give it to the impostor, he ordered. Then your aunt and the captain may leave. No, Lady Margaret walks to me first. Crowther pulled the cord tighter. If I release her, you will run. Eleanor looked at the ground. 3 strips of disturbed soil crossed the path, but rainwater had collected only in 2 of them. The 3rd remained dry. It had been dug earlier and covered before the storm. That was where Crowther had buried the firing line, connecting the charges. Her aunt followed Eleanor's gaze. Lady Margaret shifted 1 foot toward a loose stone beside the gate. Crowther noticed. Do not move. Eleanor lifted the list into the flame. The corner caught. No! The impostor shouted. Crowther looked away for 1 second. Lady Margaret kicked the loose stone. It rolled down the slope and struck the firing line buried beneath the false strip of soil. The cord jumped from the ground, revealing its path. Adrian fired. His bullet severed the line between Crowther's wrist and the first charge. The soldiers rushed forward. The impostor shoved Captain Bell into the open grave and ran toward the trees with the white ledger. Crowther fired wildly, striking a stone angel. Eleanor crossed the safe section of the path and reached her aunt. Adrian tackled Crowther before he could reload. They fell against the chapel gate. Crowther drew a knife, but Adrian caught his wrist and drove it into the iron bars. Where are the stolen pensions? Crowther spat blood. Ask your father. Adrian struck him once. He was not my father. Crowther laughed. You allowed a dead man to rule this estate for 11 years. What difference does it make? The impostor dragged Adrian back before he could strike again. Soldiers bound Crowther's hands. Eleanor cut the ropes around Lady Margaret. Are you hurt? Only furious. A cry rose from the open grave. Mrs. Bell had climbed down beside her son. Eleanor ran to them. Captain Bell was conscious, but blood soaked the bandage around his shoulder. The wound had reopened when the impostor pushed him. Lift him carefully, Eleanor instructed. Do not pull his left arm. The soldiers lowered a rope. Together, they raised Thomas from the grave. The impostor has the ledger, Adrian said. 2 men returned from the trees. We lost him at the river. Crowther smiled despite the blood on his mouth. Then you have nothing. Eleanor examined Captain Bell's wound. No, we have the man you declared dead. Thomas opened his eyes, and I know where the money went. Crowther lunged toward him. The impostor's soldiers forced him to his knees. Thomas looked at Adrian. Your steward bought military land certificates under the names of dead soldiers. The impostor appeared at auctions as the old Duke and confirmed the purchases. Why use my mother's name? Eleanor asked. Thomas struggled to breathe. Mary Hartwell discovered the first forged certificate. Crowther added her to the false widow list, so any payment traced to her would make her appear involved. Lady Margaret covered her mouth. She spent the rest of her life believing she had endangered Eleanor. Thomas nodded. She hid the original certificates before she died. The Hartwell vault, Eleanor said. Mrs. Bell handed her the iron key. They crossed to Mary Hartwell's tomb. Eleanor inserted the key into a small lock beneath the stone nameplate. A panel opened, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay her father's missing medicine case. Crowther's face changed. His men had taken a second case from the cottage, never realizing her father owned two identical ones. Eleanor opened it. The medical instruments remained inside, along with a lead ball wrapped in cloth and 7 folded pension certificates. Each certificate bore the reversed Blackwood seal. Thomas pointed to the lead ball. "Colonel, compare it with the pistol the impostor carried. The mark from the barrel will identify the weapon used to shoot me. The impostor took custody of the evidence." Crowther stopped smiling. Eleanor unfolded the first certificate. Her mother's signature appeared beneath the payment line. Lady Margaret shook her head. "That is not Mary's writing." "I know." Eleanor turned the paper over. Her mother had written a message across the back. The white ledger records theft. The blue list records witnesses. Neither reveals the man who ordered the first death. Below, it appeared a single date. Adrian read it over Eleanor's shoulder. "That was the day my father died." A shout came from the trees. One of the soldiers returned, carrying the impostor's abandoned coat. The white ledger was not inside. "He reached the river," the soldier said. A carriage was waiting on the opposite bank. "Who was driving?" the impostor asked. "Lady Cecily Ashbourne." Crowther closed his eyes. Eleanor looked at the certificates again. The forged payments began 11 years ago, yet Crowther had not received sole control of the fund until 5 years later. Someone else had started the scheme. Adrian saw the conclusion in her face. "My father? Perhaps." Thomas Bell shook his head. "The old Duke tried to stop it. That is why he died." Adrian turned toward Crowther. "Who ordered my father's murder?" Crowther remained silent. Captain Bell pointed to the scorched corner of the blue list. "Heat it again." Eleanor held the paper near a torch without allowing the flame to touch it. Slowly, invisible writing darkened between the 7 names. A final name appeared. Lady Margaret read it aloud. "Dowager Duchess. The Dowager Duchess Blackwood." Adrian went completely still. "My mother." From the chapel tower, a clock began striking 2. The impostor looked toward Eleanor. "Dawn is 3 hours away. If we do not produce the white ledger, your arrest warrant still stands." Eleanor folded the blue list. "Then we must reach the Dowager Duchess before Lady Cecily does." The Dowager Duchess lived at Ashcombe Abbey, 12 miles from Blackwood Hall. Eleanor rode beside Adrian, while the impostor's carriage carried Crowther behind them. Captain Bell remained under military protection at Hartwell Cottage with his mother and Lady Margaret. "You do not have to come," Adrian said. "My name is still on the warrant." "I meant you do not have to face my mother." Eleanor looked toward the road. "Did she know my mother?" "I never heard Mary Hartwell's name until tonight." "That was not my question." Adrian was silent for several moments. "My mother employed your father during the winter before mine died. She dismissed him after he refused to sign a certificate, claiming the Duke had died, naturally." Eleanor pulled her horse to a stop. "You knew this?" "I knew there had been a disagreement. I never asked what the certificate contained. My father was threatened into silence." "Yes." "And you allowed Crowther to accuse him of dishonesty because examining the truth would have embarrassed your family." Adrian dismounted. The soldiers continued ahead, leaving them alone beneath the trees. "When my father died, I inherited his title, his debts, and a household that treated every question as betrayal. My mother told me Crowther had preserved the estate. So you rewarded obedience. I rewarded silence." Eleanor faced him. "Those are often the same thing to powerful men." He accepted the judgment without protest. "At Ashcombe, I will state publicly that I ignored your father's warning. I will also withdraw every accusation made against him by Blackwood House. That may destroy your mother's reputation. If she ordered my father's death, her reputation is not mine to protect." They resumed their journey. Ashcombe Abbey appeared shortly before 4. Every window on its northern side burned with candlelight. Lady Cecily's carriage stood outside. Adrian drew his pistol. and entered without knocking. They found Cecily in the library beside the Dowager Duchess. The Dowager Duchess Blackwood was nearly 70, but age had not softened her. She sat upright in a high-backed chair, while the white ledger burned in the fireplace. Adrian rushed toward it. Cecily seized a poker and scattered the flaming pages. The soldiers smothered the fire, but most of the writing had already turned to ash. The Dowager Duchess calmly lifted her teacup. "You always did arrive after the important decisions were made." Adrian faced her. "Did you order my father's murder?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Did you know the impostor was impersonating him?" "I knew his resemblance occasionally proved useful." "Useful for stealing widows' pensions?" "Useful for keeping this family solvent." Adrian's face hardened. "You admit it." "I admit that Blackwood Estates employed 4,000 people. Your father intended to confess that he had invested their pension reserves in a failed shipping company. So you replaced the money by stealing from dead soldiers. I redirected funds no one was collecting. They had mothers and wives. They had names on paper." Eleanor stepped forward. "Names you believed no one would defend." The Dowager Duchess's gaze settled upon her. "You must be Mary's daughter. You remember her. She possessed the same tiresome conviction that kindness was a form of authority. She discovered your scheme. She discovered one certificate and misunderstood it. Then why was she added to the payment list? To discredit her if she spoke." Adrian stared at his mother. "You ruined an innocent woman. I protected my son's inheritance. You protected your control over it." The Dowager Duchess set down her cup, and I succeeded. Until this girl traded a chair for a beggar and convinced you to tear apart your own house. Cecily moved toward Eleanor. "She did more than that. She forged the blue list." The impostor entered, carrying the warrant. "Do you have proof?" Cecily removed the copied Blackwood seal from her reticule. "I found this in Miss Hartwell's shawl." Eleanor recognized the wax trapped in its edge. It was the mold used to create the reversed stag. Cecily held up the remaining half of Eleanor's scorched blue paper. "She gave me this before the banquet and instructed me to hide it beneath her chair." "That is a lie," Eleanor said. The Dowager Duchess looked toward the impostor. The girl knew her family would lose their home on Monday. She manufactured a scandal, accused a duke's household, and then demanded his protection. The impostor examined the seal. "Miss Hartwell, this was found among your belongings." "It was placed there." Every accused person says the same." Adrian stepped between them. "I witnessed Crowther attempt to kill her." The Dowager Duchess smiled. Crowther was fleeing a conspiracy that she created. The impostor looked toward the ruined ledger. Their strongest financial record was gone, and Cecily had produced the missing seal. "I must enforce the warrant." "No," Adrian said. The soldiers reached for Eleanor. Adrian drew his pistol. Every weapon in the room rose. Eleanor stepped in front of him. "Put it down. They are arresting you with evidence my mother planted. If you fire upon Crown soldiers, no testimony you give will help me." Adrian's grip tightened. "Then what would?" "The truth they cannot dismiss." He lowered the pistol. Before the impostor could speak, Adrian removed the Blackwood signet ring from his hand and placed it on the table. "I surrender my claim to direct the family's private estates until this investigation is complete. Search every Blackwood residence, every account, and every letter. Publish my father's failed investments and my own refusal to examine them." The Dowager Duchess rose. "You would destroy generations of work for this woman." "No, I would expose generations of lies because she showed me what they cost." The impostor took the ring. "Your statement will be recorded. But Miss Hartwell still comes with us." The soldiers placed Eleanor's hands behind her. As Cecily stepped aside, Eleanor noticed soot on the hem of her gown. Not ordinary ash. A thin white residue clung to the velvet, the same chalky powder mixed into the forged seal. Cecily had knelt beside the fireplace, but she had also stepped somewhere covered in sealing dust. The white ledger had not been brought directly to Ashcombe Abbey. It had been copied first. Eleanor looked at the cold teacup beside the Dowager Duchess. "Your Grace, what time did Lady Cecily arrive?" The Dowager Duchess answered before Cecily could. "At 1:30. Eleanor smiled. "Impossible." Cecily's eyes widened. The bridge from Hartwell Graveyard was washed out before midnight. The only open road passes the Blackwood military office. Adrian understood. She stopped there. "To copy the ledger," Eleanor said. "The original burned. but its pages left impressions on the paper beneath them. Azus, the impostor, looked toward Cecily. Where is the copy? I made no copy. Eleanor allowed the soldiers to lead her toward the door. Then you will have no objection to repeating that at the public pension hearing this morning. There is no hearing. There is now, Adrian said. Every widow, soldier, tenant, and guest who witnessed tonight will be invited. Eleanor looked back at the Dowager Duchess. Bring the forged seal. Bring the burned ledger. Bring every accusation you have made against me. The Dowager Duchess's confidence finally wavered. Why would we agree to such a spectacle? Because if you refuse, Eleanor said, everyone will know you are afraid of one poor woman asking questions. The impostor paused. Then he ordered his soldiers to escort them all back to Blackwood Hall. As dawn broke beyond the windows, Eleanor met Adrian's gaze. They will lie again. He nodded. Then how do we stop them? We do not stop them. Eleanor looked toward the white residue on Cecily's gown. We make them tell a lie. Only the person who copied the ledger could know. By 8 o'clock, the banquet hall had become a courtroom without a judge. The widows stood where noble brides had competed for Adrian's attention hours earlier. Soldiers filled the rear of the room, while tenants, servants, and guests crowded every doorway. Eleanor entered under guard. The chair she had given Mrs. Bell remained beside the Duke's table. This time, no one tried to remove it. The impostor placed the forged seal, the blue list, the scorched certificates, and the surviving fragments of the white ledger before the witnesses. The Dowager Duchess sat at the centre. Lady Cecily stood beside her. Crowther was brought in with his hands chained, but the impostor remained missing. The impostor addressed the hall. Eleanor Hartwell is accused of stealing military pensions, forging the Blackwood seal, and setting fire to the estate archive. She has requested that her accusers present their evidence publicly. Cecily stepped forward. Miss Hartwell gave me the blue list before the banquet and asked me to hide it beneath her chair. Eleanor lifted the scorched paper. You told the officer that you never touched it. I refused to join your conspiracy. Then how did you know it was blue? No one displayed it before Mrs. Bell disappeared. Cecily looked toward Crowther. He told me. Crowther remained silent. Eleanor turned to the officer. Please record that she has changed her statement. The Dowager Duchess rose. A frightened woman's imperfect memory does not prove innocence. The copied seal was still found among Miss Hartwell's belongings. And you claimed it belonged to my father, Eleanor said. How could you know its supposed owner before the officer examined it? The Dowager Duchess hesitated. Adrian stepped forward. My mother employed Dr. Hartwell shortly before my father's death. When he refused to sign a false medical certificate, Blackwood House allowed his reputation to be destroyed. His mother stared at him. You would humiliate your own blood for this woman? No, I would expose my own failure because her family paid for it. He faced the widows. 5 years ago, I ignored their complaints and gave Crowther sole authority over the pension fund. The theft continued because I protected my household's name instead of listening to the people it had harmed. The room fell silent. Mrs. Bell's wounded son stepped forward. I followed a payment entered under a dead soldier's name. It led to military land purchased by Crowther. Cecily laughed. You have no ledger, no account numbers, and no record of the Southern Barracks payment. Eleanor looked at her. No one mentioned the Southern Barracks. Cecily's face emptied of colour. That detail appeared only in the white ledger. The officer moved toward her. How did you know it? A pistol fired from the musician's gallery. The mirror behind Eleanor shattered. The impostor stepped from behind the curtain and aimed his second weapon at her. Adrian threw himself between them. The next ball tore through his sleeve. Soldiers rushed the stairs, but the impostor seized Cecily and dragged her against him. You promised to take me to France, she cried. You were useful until you allowed her to find the copy. Cecily looked toward the heavy curtain above them. Eleanor followed her gaze and reached for its release rope. Cecily drove her heel onto the impostor's foot and dropped. Eleanor pulled. The curtain fell over him, and the soldiers dragged him to the floor. The officer turned back to Cecily. Where is the copy? I made no copy. I made no copy. Eleanor pointed to the white residue on her gown. That is marking chalk from the military copying room. You stopped there after leaving the graveyard. The officer searched Cecily's reticule and found a key engraved with the number 12. It opened a metal records box, waiting in the military carriage outside. Inside lay several thin sheets covered in reversed white impressions. The officer held the first sheet before the surviving mirror. Payment dates appeared. Soldiers' names followed. At the bottom was the order that had begun the theft 11 years earlier. Eleanor placed her mother's original certificate beside it. The person who signed this certificate also signed the first transfer. Read the name. The officer compared the signatures. Then he looked directly at the Dowager Duchess. The mirror shattered. The imposter Blackwood stepped from behind the curtain and aimed his second weapon directly at Eleanor. She will not hear that name. The soldiers pulled the imposter from beneath the fallen curtain. His pistol slid across the floor and stopped beside the chair Eleanor had surrendered to Mrs. Bell. Cecily remained on her knees. "You promised no one would die." The imposter laughed bitterly. "The Dowager Duchess ordered her husband's death 11 years ago. What made you believe she would spare anyone now?" Adrian pressed one hand against his bleeding arm. "Tell them what happened to my father." The imposter looked toward the Dowager Duchess. The old Duke discovered the pension reserve was nearly empty. He intended to sell private land, restore the money, and confess everything before Parliament. "He would have destroyed this family," she said. "No," Eleanor answered. "He would have destroyed your control over it." The officer placed the copied transfer order beside Mary Hartwell's certificate. The signatures matched. He read the name aloud. "Beatrice Blackwood, Dowager Duchess of Blackwood." Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. Around her, the 7 women from the blue list stood together. The Dowager Duchess looked at them without remorse. "I preserved an estate, a title, and thousands of livelihoods." Adrian stepped away from her. "You preserved your authority by declaring living soldiers dead and silencing the women who remembered them." The officer ordered her arrest. The imposter recovered the signed transfer order from beneath the shattered mirror. He read the name aloud. "The Dowager Duchess Blackwood, Dowager Duchess of Blackwood." Mrs. Bell closed her eyes. Around her, the 7 women from the blue list stood together. The Dowager Duchess looked at them without remorse. "You speak as though I stole for pleasure. I preserved an estate, a title, and thousands of livelihoods." "You preserved your authority," Adrian said. "The estate could have survived the truth. You feared that you would not." The imposter ordered soldiers to arrest her. The Dowager Duchess turned to her son. "You would permit common soldiers to touch your mother?" Adrian removed the blood-stained cloth from his arm. "You permitted wounded soldiers to be declared dead so you could steal from their families." She held out her hand as though he might still escort her from the room. He stepped away. The Dowager Duchess was taken beside Crowther and the imposter. Lady Cecily remained near the gallery stairs. Her betrayal had endangered Eleanor, destroyed evidence, and helped the imposter escape. "I did not know they intended to kill anyone," she whispered. "You knew the warrant was false," the imposter said. "You helped frame an innocent woman because you wanted her removed from the Duke's attention." Cecily lowered her eyes. She was arrested for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and assisting a fugitive. Her decision to help capture the imposter would later spare her imprisonment for life, but not public disgrace or years of restricted residence under Crown supervision. Crowther was convicted of fraud, attempted murder, kidnapping, and the theft of military funds. The imposter was convicted of impersonation, conspiracy, and murder. The Dowager Duchess's private property was seized to repay the widows. She lost her royal patronage and spent the remainder of her life confined far from Blackwood land. Adrian's punishment did not end with theirs. He testified before Parliament that his negligence had allowed the theft to continue. He permanently surrendered control of the pension fund and resigned from 2 military committees. He sold his London residence and 3 unentailed properties to restore every stolen payment with interest. Then he stood before the people gathered in Blackwood Hall. "Dr. Jonathan Hartwell was an honest physician," he said. "Mary Hartwell was not a thief or conspirator. Blackwood House threatened them, discredited them, and profited from their silence." Eleanor listened beside her aunt. Adrian turned toward her. "I cannot return the years your parents lost. I can only ensure that their names are never again used to protect mine." The imposter tore Eleanor's arrest warrant in half. Captain Bell's living status was restored, along with his rank and unpaid salary. Amos Reed, the dismissed clerk, was found hiding under another name after fleeing Crowther's threats. He returned to testify and became the first independent auditor of the new Soldiers' Relief Trust. Mrs. Bell received the pension she had been denied, but she refused to sit quietly and enjoy it. She accepted Eleanor's invitation to join the Trust's Widows' Council, where no payment could be approved without the signature of someone who understood what its absence cost. 3 months later, Hartwell Cottage reopened. Adrian had repaired the broken door, but Eleanor paid for the work from the compensation legally awarded to her family. She would not allow gratitude to become another form of dependence. The front room became a small clinic. The adjoining office housed the Widows' Council. One afternoon, Adrian arrived, carrying the porcelain bird broken during the search. Fine gold lines joined its repaired pieces. "I know an apology cannot make it whole," he said. Eleanor placed the bird on the mantel. No, but honest repair does not pretend the break never happened. He did not ask her to forgive him. He did not offer money, a title, or protection. Instead, he returned each Thursday to read pension petitions aloud to the council. He listened when the widows corrected him, and he signed nothing until every name had been spoken. A year after the banquet, Blackwood Hall hosted its first public relief supper. No marriage contest was announced. No noble bride was promised a place beside the Duke. When Eleanor entered, she found one chair remaining at the front table. Adrian stood beside it. Before he could speak, an elderly woman arrived late, leaning heavily upon a wooden cane. Every guest turned. Adrian lifted the chair and carried it to her himself. Mrs. Bell smiled from across the room. Eleanor did too. "You have surrendered your place, Your Grace," she said. "Do not expect another. I was hoping to earn one." He did not reach for her hand. "May I sit beside you?" Eleanor looked around the hall. The widows occupied the finest seats. Her mother's name hung above the relief office, cleared of every accusation. Her aunt was laughing with Captain Bell, and no servant dared turn away the poor. Only then did Eleanor move her chair slightly to the side. "There is room here," she said. Adrian sat not at the head of the table, but beside her. The first time Eleanor entered Blackwood Hall, every lady had tried to impress a duke. She had chosen to help one forgotten woman instead. In the end, it was the Duke who had to prove himself worthy of the seat she offered.